Joseph Fletcher's Situation Ethics is an approach to ethics that places love at the centre of our moral decision-making. Specifically, situation ethics says that what makes an action morally right is it being the most loving thing in that situation. This means that even murder could be morally right, Fletcher says, if it turned out that in that particular situation, murder was the most loving thing to do. Fletcher rejects two opposing approaches to ethics, legalism and antinomianism. So a legalist is someone who enters moral decision-making complete with a set of moral rules or principles that they can simply apply to that situation and all situations like it. Legalism includes deontological approaches like Kantian ethics, which says, for instance, that lying is wrong and always wrong in all situations. Even if lives could be saved by lying, lying is still wrong. Fletcher accuses legalists of blindly following moral principles without considering the individual situations. An antinomian, on the other hand, is someone who enters ethical decision-making with no moral rules or principles at all, and instead they just rely on, say, intuition or conscience to make their decisions there and then in the moment. Fletcher accuses antinomians of having no moral guidance. So Fletcher argues that there's a healthy medium between these two positions. He rejects the legalist strictness in following multiple moral rules, and he rejects the antinomian lack of moral rules. Fletcher says that there was one moral law, and that is to do the most loving thing in that situation. And he calls this approach situation ethics. He fleshes out this idea of the most loving thing with his 6 propositions. These show how love is supposed to function in our ethical decision-making. So number 1, love only is always good. So this is a point about intrinsic value. He says that love is the only thing with intrinsic value. That means, or the only thing that is intrinsically good. So that means that love is good in itself or good for its own sake. And love is always good. Love is never bad. 2, love is the only norm. So love ought to be at the centre of our ethical decision-making. And this means that it might even be right to disobey the 10 Commandments sometimes if it were the most loving thing in that situation to do so. And this may seem like a pretty radical thing for a Christian to say, but Fletcher sees his moral theories deriving from the teachings of Jesus. Think, for instance, like love thy neighbour. And by love, he means agapeic love. This is not a romantic love. It's not a friendship love, but it's a Christian love. It's Christian love that reflects the love that God has for us. It is an attitude, not a feeling. 3, love and justice are the same. So this means quite simply that the most loving thing is also the most just thing. And to be just is also to be loving. 4, love is not liking. So, as I said, Jesus taught us to love thy neighbour. And this applies to whether we like our neighbour or not, or whether our neighbour is our enemy. So agapeic love is loving the unlovable. Remember, it's an attitude. 5, love justifies the means. So basically, consequences have more significance for Fletcher. And we ought to when we are calculating what the most loving thing is, we ought to bring consequences into that calculation. They can be the thing that can make the action the most loving thing. 6, love decides there and then. So basically, we shouldn't go into a situation with a ready-made rule book of what the right and wrong thing is to do, because situations vary, and we should therefore take each situation as it comes and decide on a situation-to-situation basis, because, you know, it might be the most loving thing to do this in this situation, but in another situation it might not be the most loving thing. There are 4 working principles that form the foundation of this situationist way of thinking. These are the 3 P's and an R. There's pragmatism, positivism, personalism, and relativism. So by pragmatism, Fletcher is referring to the idea that when we're thinking of what the most loving thing is in a situation, we have to bear in mind what will actually work in the situation. It's no good if it only works in theory, it has to actually work. So he uses the idea, the example of a mother who discovers that her 13-year-old daughter is having sex. Now, the mother could say to the daughter, you should not have sex, you should conform to the rule not to have underage sex, but that might not work. She might still go off and have sex. So it might be that the most loving thing, what actually works in the situation, is to just provide the daughter with contraception. Positivism refers to the idea that situation ethics, it ultimately rests on the foundation of faith. So we cannot prove that agapeic love ought to be the centre of our ethical decision-making. We can only take it on faith. By personalism, this is referring to the idea that people should be at the centre of our ethical decision-making. So for Fletcher, ethics is about people, it's about relationships, and so therefore humans should be at the centre. Relativism, by relativism, Fletcher is referring to the idea that what makes an action morally right or wrong is relative to love. So there are no absolutes. What is right in one situation may be wrong in another situation, because it might be the most loving thing here, but it's not the most loving thing over there. So finally, we can have, say, a couple of things about what Fletcher says about conscience. So for Fletcher, conscience is a function, not a faculty. So that is, it is not some inner voice or some intuition that sort of tells us what to do, makes us feel guilty or whatever. He says it is a verb, not a noun. So, and he goes so far as to say that there is no conscience. Conscience is merely a word for our attempts to make decisions creatively, constructively, fittingly. So conscience refers to our attempts to make more decisions appropriately according to the particular situation. So that's it. I have a 3-part series on situation ethics on my channel, which goes into more detail about the things I've spoken about here if you're interested. But for now, thank you for watching and see you next time.